Welcome to Whispers. This is where I share the most haunting, bizarre, and downright weird stories from Reddit and the web. Think ghostly encounters, unexplained mysteries, and tales so strange they'll stick with you long after you've heard them. So, grab a blanket, turn down the lights, and hit that subscribe button. Being left alone at a house in the middle of the Mojave Desert. Back around 1992, I was in high school. At that time. I was a sophomore, and unlike most of my friends in school, I didn't work the typical high school jobs like McDonald's, Taco Bell, some retail job in the mall, or work at the local grocery store. I was very good with my hands and worked jobs like construction, demolition, flooring, and auto mechanics. All of my contacts I worked under the table as I started working on some of these jobs at 14. It was beneficial for both of us as I was only called in when needed, and I was the guy willing to only work evenings and weekends. One of my contacts worked doing remodeling projects like at restaurants, bars, retail shops, and typical commercial projects that we could only work after hours. Like I said, that worked out for both of us because I went to school and would sometimes work after school or weekends. For this one contact, it wasn't uncommon for him to leave me alone at a site and have a list of things for me to do alone, mostly demolition work. I did this while the other crew was doing the installation or remodeling work. I was the kid but had their respect because I did what I was supposed to do and did the work of a man without complaints. I got paid good, and in one night I could make more than my friends did working all week at McDonald's. This one instance I got a call from the guy I worked for, and he said he had a project for me and if I could work the following Saturday. I said, yeah, sure. He said, be sure to bring food and lots to drink as there was nothing nearby. I used to have a small cooler and would fill it with drinks like Cokes, Gatorade, or whatever, plus chips and a couple sandwiches. Back then, I could eat a whole pizza by myself and burn it all off. He picked me up that Saturday morning as I didn't have a car or license yet, so he would pick me up and drive me to sites for work and leave me alone there. I rarely worked with his other crews as they were the more skilled labor guys. I was just the tear-out kid. Here is the part that was my major downfall to this story. I didn't pay attention to where we were going. I was too busy talking to him, and I think we were talking about cars. You see, at the time, my goal was to save up enough money to buy an old muscle car and rebuild it. It took a long time to arrive to the site. As we drove up, it was in the middle of nowhere. Now you may not think California has places like this, but back in the early 1990s out in the Mojave Desert, yes, it was big plots of land and homes, more than a few city blocks apart. I knew we left the highway and went down a few other two-lane highways for a long distance. I remember he asked me about my drinks, and he pulled out a brand new jug of water that he had in his truck that looked like it had been there a while, and told me to take it with me just in case. He said that the water to the house I would be working at was off. As we pull up to the property, he is in a hurry to drop off tools and get to another work site. So I hurry up and help him with things like breaker bars, shovels, pry bar, hammer, broom, several big trash bins, and a small tool bag that I often had with me. He tells me that he will be back to pick me up at about 5 to 6 p.m. as there is no electricity to this site either, plus it should only take me till then to do what I needed to do. That was always his way of saying, I am only paying you till this time, so you better get everything done by then. It was never too outrageous, and we always had a good understanding on time and tasks. He drove away, and I am at this property all alone. I walk into the house, it's mostly empty. My job was to remove all remaining furniture, contents, and appliances, remove all the flooring, gut the kitchen and bathrooms, and remove all of the wood paneling. This project was going to be like what we now call a flip. They were going to fix it up and sell it. Almost immediately, I get kind of spooked by the place. It was very odd. Now, mind you, I am used to being on sites alone working all night. This was the daytime on a Saturday and bright outside. However, the house was old, dark, musty, and kind of cool inside the kind of cool that gives you goosebumps. To add to the spook factor, the house let me describe what I remember about the house. Imagine walking back in time to the 1960s or earlier, dark green carpet that looked like matted down broccoli, pine wood everywhere that had a darker stain to it. The wood paneling wasn't the kind used in the 1980s sheet paneling, but actual board paneling tongued and groove, old window curtains that all looked like someone's grandma made, avocado green sink, stovetop, oven, and the stuff that was left behind like old furniture and a closet full of old stuffed animals that looked to be about 30 years old. The style of this house was like an old Western ranch, as there were wagon wheels inside and outside the house. I had an old battery-powered radio, but only could get a few stations, but was just happy for the noise. I started removing all the junk from the house, and as I normally did on a project if there wasn't a dumpster on site, I made a trash pile. I tore up all the flooring next. To my delight, everything seemed to come up with ease, and it was rip, cut, and toss. I took a big demo hammer to the kitchen and tore it apart in less than an hour. I ended up using that big jug of water that my boss had given me to wash my hands and face periodically, but by late noon, as most who know the desert, the dryness also starts to take moisture from you, especially if you are working in it. So by late afternoon, I am down to my last drink, and I had already ate everything I brought. No worries. I thought the guys should be here in a couple hours to pick me up, as the time gets closer for them to arrive. I am all done with my tasks. I even sweep the entire place, and it's now ready for the rehab crew to get to work making this place look modern. The time of year I was out here, it wasn't a typical hot desert day, but in the desert, as soon as the sun goes down, it starts to cool rapidly. I had a flannel shirt, but that wasn't enough, and it was starting to get dark. This was the time before cell phones were common, and there was no electricity, water, and phone service to the house. I climbed up to get on top of the roof of the house to get a better look to see if I can see something in the distance, and what looked like miles down, I saw a smaller road that this dirt road led to, and a few homes, but those homes were all in dark. My first thought was hike down to a neighbor's house and ask them to use the phone. The nearest house, no one was home, and this home also looked abandoned. If you remember, the early 90s was the start of a decline of the economy and recession, so it wasn't uncommon for a lot of foreclosed homes in a tract of homes. A lot of those I worked on at that time. I started to think about my options as darkness fast approached. One was to stay at the house until morning, to hike with what little water I had a few miles in the dark Mojave night, 3 wait until early morning and hike out of there to some sort of civilization. It also suddenly occurred to me that no one knew where I was except my boss. I don't know if he told anyone else where I was, and certainly my family wouldn't miss me until maybe Sunday night, but I didn't even tell them I was going to work there. They knew me and how much I would work to save up for my car that they never worried about me not coming home. As full darkness was all around me, it was amazing looking out at the night sky, and lucky for me the moon was bright. I didn't have a flashlight or any way to make a fire. Even though I tried, I was going to make a small bonfire out of broken up construction debris as the temperatures started to fall, probably down to the low 40s. My only option was to go back inside the empty, creepy house that somehow seemed even more creepy sitting alone in the dark. At about 8 p.m., the batteries on my radio, which was my only source of little light and noise, started to die. I grabbed an old wooden chair and sit in the living room of this house facing the door. I am starting to hear wind, odd noises which I assume are animals in the distance, and what sounds like leaves cracking under feet. I am starting to shiver from the cold, so I set off on trying to start a fire in the fireplace. Imagine like Tom Hanks in Cast Away trying to start a fire. At least this is keeping my mind of my situation. Sitting in this living room next to the fireplace, the house seems even more darker than it should have, mind you. In the daytime, the inside seemed dark, so with only the moonlight, I was pretty much sitting in complete darkness. My mind starts to play tricks on me. I am seeing shadows moving outside and inside the house. I am also starting to hear someone talking like whispers or something. I get up from my chair and yell out, "Hello!" And just as I do, I hear something fall from the other side of the house. I run over to the door and go outside again. At least in the moonlight I can see better. But off in the distance, I hear noises and see movement, but can't make it out. I have my pile of tools by the edge of the house, ready for when my boss picks me up, so I run over there and grab Big Daddy. It was my heavy pry bar that I used in demo. I was ready to defend myself for who or what was out there. And I have to keep moving because my undershirt and flannel shirt wasn't enough to keep me warm. The wind was also starting to pick up, and for as far as I could see, no lights around me. I didn't want to try to make it up on the house again out of fear of falling in the dark, but I get up on top of the gate just to try and gain a little bit of altitude to see if I see some house lights on nearby or car lights. My mind went to the stories that circled around at the time about how people would come up to Mojave Desert and bury bodies, how there were Satanist groups out here, and how people would go missing for no reason out here. Every noise had me on edge, and every shadow had my heart pounding. Now I knew no one was in that house, but I swear I would hear noises from inside. I huddled up on the front porch looking in the living room window, expecting to see someone at any moment. By around 11 p.m., I look at my watch thinking this is going to be a long night, as all this stuff only happened since it got dark. I don't know how I am going to make it another 6 hours till daybreak. I start thinking the moment it gets to be daybreak, like the moment light starts to appear on the horizon, I am going to take the little water I had left and walk east. I knew going east I would eventually make it somewhere. The dirt road I was off of, I knew that direction led to a paved road. Closer to midnight, I am wide awake, my eyes are fixed on the dirt road, thinking that any time now a car would come down it, and maybe they can call for help for me. I remember casually turning to look back into the house, as all this time I keep hearing noises but telling myself maybe a rat or some animal. I see a shadow of a person move from the kitchen to down the hall. I jump up from sitting down and was like, that is not an animal, that is a human. I start backing my way out of the porch towards the pile and trip over debris and fall down on the ground. I get up but fall again. It was like something pushed me down or my imagination. But all of a sudden these bright lights are coming closer to me as I am laying on the ground. I jump up, and it's my boss. He is looking at me like, what the heck are you doing? I was just so glad to see him. I wasn't mad or anything. Just asked him what happened. He said that he was sorry, but he thought the other crew was coming to get me, and they thought that he was coming. So no one actually came. He said it wasn't until later in the evening he asked the other crew leader about how far along I got that he said, I didn't go get him. Well, it took him almost 2 hours from where they were working to come get me. He felt really bad and told me he was going to pay me for the entire time I was out there. He also grabbed a can of Coke from his cooler and asked me if I was thirsty, and I drank that all in one gulp once we got back towards civilization. He went through a fast food drive-thru, and I ate like I had never ate before. As he was driving me home, I asked him about the house. I told him how creepy it was. He said he didn't have any information on the house, only just what we were supposed to do. After that, I made sure to always keep extra batteries, flashlight, and double the amount of liquid. I was hiding from your mom. My mom is dead. One of the creepiest stories I know personally is from my best friend when he was home at his house babysitting a friend's kid. The kid, whose name was Junior, was roughly 4 or 5, I want to say. His dad was a courier, so would often be doing deliveries late at night. David, my best friend, was a teen by this point, so being home without an adult was no great task. It's important to mention that his father was a pretty paranoid individual who bought into a lot of fear-mongering in the world, so he had cameras set up all over the place. I want to say this happened in 2014. Anyway, David was busy in his bedroom and was minding his own business, but then decided to head into his den, where all the cameras happened to be set up. But the den was locked. David knocked on the door to the den, and Junior opened it up. Why did you lock the door? David said. Because of the lady, Junior said. What lady? David asked. Your mom. I saw her in the kitchen. The house's living room was directly connected to the kitchen, and if you were standing in the kitchen entryway, you could see the door leading outside. It was one of those screened-in sitting areas. Junior claimed that David's mother was right there in the doorway. Really strange, especially considering David's mother had passed away just about 8 months prior. David was chilled by the remark, but the skeptic in him knew it was likely just Junior's overly active imagination. So he agreed to go and check with him. He brought a kitchen knife, if I'm remembering the story correctly. He walked with Junior down the hallway into the kitchen, where the door was open. The door being open was pretty normal. It was a hot summer day and the house trapped a lot of heat. David stepped out onto the screen sitting area and looked left down the ramp his mother used to use to get outside. Nothing. He looked to the right, seeing the length of the yard. Nothing. Junior was insistent that there was someone there, which is strange considering usually in situations like these, kids tend to feel better after you poke around for them. David couldn't calm him down. Junior was certain. He kept saying, I saw your mom, she was here. So David bargained with him. Everything's recorded on the cameras, so we'll just look on them and we'll know for certain whether someone was there or not. So they sifted through the cameras, and David looked for a timestamp around when Junior claimed that his deceased mother had shown up. He stared down all the cameras as the timer ticked on, and nothing showed up. But suddenly, He watched as the camera showed a figure enter his backyard from the front by pulling the latch. An old woman, at least in her mid-60s, confidently walked into their backyard. She had a cloth grocery bag in her hand. She headed up the ramp and stood in their screened sitting area for a few moments. She then reached for the door to the kitchen, cracking it open. Then she brazenly stepped inside. After some time, Junior saw her in the kitchen and headed to David to tell him. Based on the camera's timestamps, she stood in the kitchen for at least 10 minutes. The absolutely insane part is, she left as David went to investigate with Junior. The camera footage showed him looking around and her leaving as he looked around. When he looked left down at the ramp where she'd come up, she had already wrapped around and actually took the long way around through the length of the yard. When he looked right, he quite literally just missed her. It was genuinely a matter of maybe a half second. Someone wandered right into his backyard and right into his kitchen, then stood there for 10 minutes in his kitchen doing God knows what. Nothing was stolen, nobody was harmed or anything. Well, anyway, the night went on and nothing came of it. Me personally, I would have phoned the police. But David wouldn't. I think there's a chance that his dad may have had some guns that were acquired through perhaps some non-reputable methods. They were locked away from everyone, whatever small comfort that is, haha. So David's instinct was that his dad would likely be furious about the police being called. Well, anyway, some time passed. Days, weeks, who knows? I'm not even sure how this information came about, but somehow David was told by either a family member or a staff member that the old woman that wandered into the house had dementia and had an episode and just sort of found herself there by a string of coincidences. Well, that was intense. Thank you so much, everyone, for tuning in to Spine-Chilling Tale on Whispers. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to hit that like button and subscribe for more eerie adventures from the darkest corners of Reddit. Got a weird or creepy story of your own? Share it in the comments, and it could be featured in an upcoming video. Until next time, stay curious and keep listening.